Well, thank you for being here. Thank you, DC Comics. So I wanted to start by asking a general question to all of you. What does Superman stand for, and why has he been a fan favorite for 80 years?
Well,
when
you're that strong, you don't stand for much, you know. Sorry, bad joke.
Yeah, well, hope is what he stands for in the most general sense, and that's why the character has lasted long, because you can't argue with that. No. It's inarguable. Hope is good. Yeah. So, yeah.
Agreed.
Moral integrity.
Yeah.
Yeah, which extends to everything. Yeah.
Truth without looking for a reward.
Yeah, he stands for the future. He sort of puts himself up there as a suggestion of what mankind could look toward, and he doesn't force anybody to do that, but he's out there and seeks to inspire people.
Yeah, and also truth, justice, and the American way. This is a phrase synonymous with Superman for decades, and it's just one of those almost cliche things, but now in this day and age, truth and justice and the American way, they mean different things to different people.
Right.
And some of it is under siege. And so writing a character who believes in them so much it's actually a great way to spend your day.
It's completely ingrained in him.
Yeah,
he doesn't have to think about doing it, he just does it.
Yep.
Yeah, and we need that always, especially right now.
Exactly.
So do you guys see him more as the Boy Scout figure he has kind of been for a long time, or more as a prominently alien countercultural figure he's been recently and perhaps was originally?
Well, I don't see him as a Boy Scout. That was the question as the new Spider-Man, Superman writer.
Wait. What was that?
I'm still writing Spider-Man.
Oh yeah.
It's going to be a while. I'm still writing Spider-Man on my text, but there, with Superman comes a great deal of empathy and pathos, and sometimes people can relate to that as vanilla or Boy Scout, and nothing could be further from the truth. And I remember, like, when I was writing like Captain America or Cyclops, they would say the same thing and go, "Isn't that a vanilla character?" You go, "Oh no. Those characters are the most interesting to peel back on. Someone who can stand there and has the guts to be a Boy Scout. There's a lot going on in there, and to peel it back and show you how relatable it is quite something.
Well, to call someone a Boy Scout in the way they mean it means they're bland.
Yeah.
And that's ridiculous. A character who's just trying to do good, who's trying to do the right thing. If you say that's bland, if you say that's bad, you're saying doing the right thing is bad, but doing the wrong thing is cool.
Yeah.
And that's totally the wrong message for the character.
Totally.
I've always thought of him as, there was a line, I think, in one of the early Fleischer Superman cartoons. There was a race of supermen from the planet Krypton, and I've always felt that there was something about him, maybe either spiritually or even just in the way the Kryptonians evolved, that they look ahead, that they look out for each other, they look toward the better things, and that there is, whereas humans might see crime as an option or something to consider, that's not the Kryptonian way. It's just, it would be aberrant to think that way, and I think that he personifies the best of that nature and is trying to put it out there as a way of saying, this is where I come from, this is what I do. And I think that he was lucky enough to find adopted parents who fostered that belief in him.
Mm-hmm. Anything to add, Dan?
No, only that, to me, the Boy Scout thing, he only ever had a couple of villains refer to him as a Boy Scout, if any. That was always something that came up on the part of fans, and they meant it in sort of a derogatory sense. I always thought that was remarkably unfortunate because, yeah, it's true. If we're to say it's bad to try and embrace the best qualities, there's something totally wrong with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but the struggle to do it is not a vanilla struggle.
No,
it's
not at all.
insanely hard to do what he's doing. So I always like bat that away as not even worth discussing because it's so obvious what a struggle it is.
Right.
Yeah, so see, being good is cool, guys.
Yeah.
So it's probably safe to assume that most Superman fans obviously cannot fly or bench press the Earth. So what do you think makes Superman relatable?
I think it's the fact that he is one of us. And if you go back to his creation and this idea that here he's this kind of like farm kid in the middle of the United States in Kansas, that I thought at that time in 1938, that becomes sort of representative of what we were thinking America was at that point. It was much more typical then than it is now. But at the same time, I think that is very much who he is, sort of this farm kid who grew up with a respect for life because, you know, if you live on a farm, you have animals around you all the time. They come and they go, they die. There's all sorts of things with the planting season that comes and goes, and everything lives and dies and is born again sort of stuff. And I think because of that, that is something that has always been imbued in the character.
Marv agrees.
Yeah.
Thanks, Brian. You're his assistant.
Yeah.
Of his hype man.
So how do you understand Superman's relationship with Batman, Wonder Woman, and the rest of the Justice League?
I think it's a matter of seeing people trying to accomplish the same goals, but watching them do it in a different way, and the realization that you can't have people do everything you want them to. Everybody has the right to go their own way, but their mission is the same.
Right.
I so often when you're kids, you're reading these comics, and one of the superheroes will always say, "Superman's here. What are we gonna do?"
Yeah.
So the amount of respect, like physical and emotional and spiritual respect they have for Superman is enormous. He is the standard of which they're all trying to live up to the point where it's annoying that he's there because he's constant. He's always living up to it. So, living up to that can be immense. So, but at the same time, he seems to respect the others in a way they can't even process. Like he goes to Superman. He goes to Batman and Wonder Woman, and where it goes, "I need help with this," or "You know how to do this." And I always like that you've all written scenes where they've always seemed, "Oh, Superman needs my help." Oh. And I like that. They genuinely seem like friends.
Yeah.
They genuinely seem to really like each other.
Right, and Superman never shows up and says, "I'm the guy."
Yeah.
I think the whole point is he always has this sense of presence about him, and they respond to him as the guy. But he'd be the last guy to ever say, "I'm the guy."
Right.
Which makes him the guy.
Right, exactly.
Exactly.
He's sort of the one who just his presence inspires others. And whether it's the normal people in Metropolis or the world or other superheroes, you want to do well for him. You want to be the best because of him. Yeah. If he's going to take you someplace, you know it's going to be good.
Yeah, I think you wrote a scene where the superheroes are like, "I don't want to do this thing," and Superman's like there, like, "All right." I mean, like, you can't not be your best self when he's standing there. You just have to suck it up and.
Yeah.
He's the best leader because he doesn't necessarily lead. He allows the others to come to the fore.
Yep.
Yeah, he lets Batman think he's leading.
Yeah.
So is Clark Kent or Superman the disguise? What separates Clark Kent's persona from the Superman persona?
I think they're the same.
I do too.
Superman, or rather, Kal-El came to Earth as an infant. All of his morality, all of his viewpoint comes from the Kents. Therefore, he's the right person. He's the real person. Superman doesn't talk about it, but he goes out and implements what the Kents taught him. To be right, to be good, to try your best. So I don't see much of a difference. Clark is just the character who isn't flashy, but they're both always trying to do the best.
I think about that Kill Bill bit often. It gets brought up to us quite a lot. The people think that that's a statement on Superman, and you have to make a statement. But my feelings about it are so different. Like even using the word disguise is like I wouldn't even use it. What I'm a little obsessed with right now, writing them, is that Superman was kind of thrust on him. Like this was like his father said, "You were going to do this, and we're going to send you to do this." The choice that Clark made in his life was to be a reporter. Like everything else was kind of thrust upon him, or he was sent to a place. But he chose to be a reporter. He said, "There's truth out there, and there's justice to be had that Superman can't get to, that just punching it, right? There's another way through it, and being a writer to reveal that truth is something I'm going to do. So he chooses to spend his time doing that, and I find that enormously admirable. It makes me love him all the more.
And it's something that all his powers cannot alter in any way. He is a writer. He loves being a writer. He loves telling the story that he's going to tell. And all of his powers means nothing to him. It's all about getting those words down and getting the thoughts down. And that's pure Clark.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and I think there's a difference to be drawn between a character that puts on a mask and goes and does what he does or she does, because they're making a sort of a conscious decision at that point to have this other identity. I think with Superman, I've always looked at it as being sort of like someone who's a police officer or a firefighter or whatever, someone who's in the military, where this is what they put on when they wear to go do what they do, but they come home and they're still that person. And they're not making an effort to disguise themselves so much. So I've always separated Superman out from many other characters that way.
And for people who don't know, I'm going to embarrass Dan. So we were doing, I've been doing an insane amount of research, and then all of a sudden and I got to know Dan over the course of this whole new chapter in my life. And then you start going back and like, well, the death of Superman was how many years ago? And that wasn't his first Superman story. He's been with Superman for as long as anyone's been with any character in their history of comics. Like people talk about Chris Claremont and X-Men, but what Dan's accomplished on Superman is equal, if not greater, because of the size of the stories and what he's accomplished. So it's quite amazing what he's done. And I just he did it so quietly. I like to point it out to people. He kind of just slid in there and got it done. But here we are decades later with one of the greatest achievements with a character. So,
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
You embarrassed?
Yes.
A little bit.
It doesn't seem like it's been that long. It really doesn't. So, yeah.
So since you brought it up, Dan, how did it feel to kill Superman?
When we started, it was just a story to tell, and the story came about because we had talked about it a couple of times before as let's do the death of Superman because it was a story we had read in our youth, and it had been done a couple of times, and we never had the rest of the story to go with it, and it was really it became a story that was all about trying to make a statement about Superman by removing him from the book. So we had Death of Superman. After that, it was, essentially Funeral for a Friend, which was the world without Superman. That was the story we wanted to get to. Before that, the Death of Superman was just sort of this big, fun exercise. But what we wanted to write about later was a world with no Superman. So at first it was just this cool story idea, but then as the hype started to build, it really, as I was writing and drawing the story, you become very aware that this isn't going to be the normal thing. An awful lot of people are going to be looking at this book and they're going to be reading it, and everybody was talking about it. And it became a story element in terms of news, even before the book came out, that it felt like there was always something hanging over me, especially as I was drawing the book, because it was all splash pages and everything like that. But it was a fun and magical experience.
Well, and I'm from Cleveland, so when the death of Superman happened, I was actually working at a comic book store in Cleveland, going to art school, and the line out the door that day that Superman died was
it was crazy.
Craziest thing I'd ever experienced. Right. We were in a mall in downtown Cleveland, and it was the length of the mall of people just buying Superman comics. And the whole point of working at a comic book store is not have to work this hard. So I was very annoyed by you. I wanted to sit and draw my pages
I
at the counter.
apologize now.
and then I remember being completely flustered by this, and the phone rang, and it was my mother. And she goes, "Is Superman really dead?" And I just hung up. I gotta go. And it was a crazy day. Yeah.
It was the first time that had ever happened, right?
I have a very definitive memory of everyone really believing this is going to happen.
Yeah, now they come back to life, but not back in the day.
They didn't fall. They fell for it.
Yeah.
Well, although, and I've always said, at the time, we did not know when and how we were going to bring him back.
Yeah.
We knew inevitably it would happen at some point, but then we also suspended publication for a couple of months and everything, and we did not know. When we did that entire story, we had no idea how it was going to happen. We didn't know when exactly it was going to happen, just that eventually it obviously had to. But we didn't
No,
know.
but you did the perfect thing. It was never about the death. It was what do you get out of it.
Right, exactly.
And
Yeah.
that's the mistake when you see other people doing their
Yeah.
their death cycle story. They're so obsessed with selling the death that it's really what do you get out of it? Like what kind of new stories are you going to get? Like any superhero, it's like Batman dies, and then you get all the other players rise to the occasion, and you get new story, and that's what you guys had for years.
Yeah. Did.
So, Brian, how did you end up at DC, and why did you want to write Action Comics and Superman?
I ended up at DC. Over the years, they've been very kind and made it clear that I was invited. And a few years ago, there was a serious offer was made, but it just wasn't time yet. I knew it would happen eventually. I knew me well enough to know, boy, it was just, but it wasn't time. I didn't feel like I'd finished what I was doing over there with Jessica Jones and Miles and some other stuff. But this time around, they came at me with a really decent offer that was worth turning to my friends at Marvel, who I was friends with. I'm still friends with, and to turn to them and go, hey, I got to go. It's got to be enough for them to go, yeah, you got to go. It had to be enough for them to agree, and it was, and yeah, I think Dan and Jim just, I guess everyone walks in there and says they want to do Batman. I guess that's what everyone does, but and so they were braced for that, and how they were going to tell me I'm not doing Batman, but I said if it comes along that Superman becomes available, that would be, I think, where I would go, but I don't know where you're at, and again, it's someone's gig. I don't want to take someone's gig, and then a day later he got over the shock of me saying Superman and said, actually, Action 1000 is coming down. Like I don't want to rush things, but boy, there's a real opportunity here, and I go, all right, let me think about it, and then I went back to Cleveland for my brother's wedding. It just so happened my brother was getting married, and sorry, I have to hear this again, Dan. And,
No problem.
And at the library I used to hang out in all the time. One of my friends helps run it now, and he had put together a Superman exhibit at the Cleveland Museum that connected Cleveland and Judaism and Superman and me and all this. And I walk in there, and it was like this maze I had to walk through. And by the end of it, I just texted my wife and go, close the deal. I have to do this. It really felt like someone to put a show on for me. It's like, see, you love all this stuff. You're connected to it. It's part of your DNA. And I just flashed. I remembered I was the artist for the Superman parade in the 80s when I was in college, and how connected it was to my youth. And boom, here we are.
Great. So you brought up Action 1000,
Yes.
Action Comics 1000, which is why we're here. Marv, you have a story coming up in Action Comics 1000 using artwork from the legendary Kurt Swan.
Yeah.
And what was it like to script a story drawn by such an acclaimed artist that's no longer with us?
And where was this art for all these years?
I don't know. There were 4 pages that they found of something. Superman's not in it. They're a fragment. It's not the first page. There is no last page. It was dialogued. I have a hunch it was a writing test. Just 4 pages given out to writers or something, but I don't know because nobody up there is aware of what it is.
Yes.
My assignment was to strip out the copy, look at it, and turn it into a complete story with a beginning, middle, and end, even though there's no beginning, middle, and end, and to make it a Superman story, even though there's no Superman in it, and to create an entire thing. And I used to do this all the time as an assistant editor to Joe Kubert. We would take old stories. I don't know why Joe wanted it done this way, but we'd take old war stories, and I would rewrite them as current unknown soldier stories. At Marvel, we did it once, and I don't remember the order, but it was either, we lost the license to either John Carter or Planet of the Apes. We had the artwork for one of those books, and it had to be converted to the other. How you take a John Carter story and turn it into a Planet of the Apes, I don't remember. But anyway, it's a great fun thing. Now, I had worked a lot with Kurt. I did Superman for years with Kurt. Kurt is wonderful. I mean, he's a brilliant artist. I just loved his stuff. So the idea of being able to take these 4 isolated pages and turn it into a complete Superman story. And I threw in a Superman villain, who you also don't see, because the pages were already drawn, was just wonderful. It was like working with Kurt again. He was a dear, sweet man. When I was at Disney, I would hire him to do short stories for us. He was one of those people I grew up with, and I always wondered why the covers of Jimmy Olsen and a couple of the books were so much better than the insides, and then I discovered all the covers were done by Kurt. Great artist, and it was so much fun to do it.
That's awesome. So Paul, I wanted to ask about Superman the Animated Series, because it seems like for a lot of fans, he's the definitive version of Superman. So what do you think makes him distinct from other versions of the Man of Steel?
Well, with the animated series, we were lucky in that we had such an incredible wealth and history of material to draw from Superman's various incarnations, from comic books, from radio shows, from comic strips. Everything that he is in the public mind, we sort of distilled down into what we felt was a kind of universal telling of his story. And we were able to concentrate on him as Superman and Clark Kent, and also expand his cast, so it included the Kents back at the farm, and Lois and Jimmy, and do a take on all of them. So it really grew beyond Superman to being a show that you really enjoyed all his characters and all the extended cast, and it was fun to. I know there had been other animated versions, and those characters were certainly a part of it, but in this case, we were really able to draw from the work that had gone before and make Lois and Darkseid and Lana fun versions that I think were unique to the animated series, but also rang true to the fans in general. Also, Superman himself was he was a joy to write. At first, I was wondering, how am I going to write this character, because he doesn't have the moodiness and the dark side of Batman, but he is an incredibly likable character, both as Clark and as Superman. And it's fun, perhaps making him maybe a little lower on the power scale than he was in the comics, so that he was able to wrestle with things a little bit more. So it was more of a matter of mind over matter than just brawn, even though you can show everything in a cartoon. He was a challenge to write, and he was a lot of fun. And I think people picked up on that fun.
So now I want to move on to my favorite part of the talk, which is villains. What do you think who do you think are the most interesting Superman villains? I mean, we have the obvious, obviously, but Lex is my favorite.
Yeah, I like Lex a lot. I mean, I could do a 3-year Lex Luthor series easily. I think there's that. I was also always intrigued by Toyman for whatever reason, just because it was so counter to who Superman is, right? I mean, here's this guy, and that was always a problem Superman had, which was villains. I mean, if you look throughout the history of Superman, there was always a problem with some of the villains. But I found Toyman to be strangely intriguing, just because he was so different than Superman, which was, here's a guy who makes toys. How can he possibly be a threat to Superman? How does that story not end on page 1, right? Superman shows up, boom, you're gone, story's over. So I was always intrigued by that level of villain and how you could possibly make it work with Superman.
I didn't expect that answer. Thank you. That's great.
Sure.
Yeah, Toyman shows up in my second issue. I
See,
couldn't
you
believe
get it.
either.
You get it.
But
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it either. I couldn't believe it. I go, I'm my subconscious put it in, and as I'm consciously writing it, I go,
Okay.
It must happen. We agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
I always liked with Lex Luthor, there was something I always found rather poignant with their relationship in thinking about the character, in that Lex is someone who's basically had to buy affection. Like he put himself on the scale in Metropolis where he is beneficent, and he has created all these great scientific advances, and I'm sure his name is on a lot of public buildings, and I'm sure he is lauded wherever he goes. But that wouldn't happen unless he was paying for it, unless he was going out there and buying affection as it was with his inventions and with the things he does. And there's Superman who just does it out of his heart, and people flock to him. And I think that galls Luthor on a deeply soulful level. And it's like, I have to do all this just to get a friendly hello. And he rescues a cat out of a tree, and I'm forgotten. And I think that in a lot of ways spurs on his hatred.
I like the characters who can outthink Superman. I'm not really into the big punchy guys because you're not going to be able to defeat him. The beauty of what you did was that he was finally meeting a character who could do that. But in the past, if Luthor put on a super suit or somebody else attacked him, he could physically take care of you. So that's not interesting. What I like is the characters who outthink, because that's not Superman's superpower. He's smart, but he's not Luthor. He's not Brainiac. And those characters, to me, are far more interesting because they match Superman in ways that Superman doesn't deal with the best. He has to go out of his way and find some way to deal with them that's not in his comfort zone. So to me, Brainiac and Luthor are the strongest characters.
And we have some new villains coming up, starting in Action 1000. It's the debut of a big new villain for Superman, because that was, I agree with Dan, as good as the good villains are, there are good villains, and then there's some others. And so, and it's not enough compared to like Spider-Man or Batman. He doesn't have nearly the rogues gallery that he should have compared to his legacy. So we're going to be as additive as possible. And starting right away with Action 1000 is this new villain who knows something about Superman and the history of Superman that Superman does not know. And that's going to really challenge him, both spiritually and physically. And then in the Pages of Action comics, we're debuting some criminal activity in Metropolis that has been going on right under Superman's nose. There's a criminal who has no ego. Like Lex has a lot of ego. I need Superman to acknowledge that I did this, and imagine a criminal that is inspired by Lex Luthor and excited by, Lex, you go get Superman's attention as much as you want. Go get Daddy's attention, and we're going to run our business like adults. And I don't need Superman's attention, and I don't need any of it. And what kind of criminal empire can you build right under Superman's nose? How smart do you have to be to do this? And it's been going on for years, and he didn't even know. So that's what we're going to be doing coming in the future.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you got to pick that up. So no
that was my point, if I wasn't clear.
Yeah.
Trying to sell comics here, guys.
Yeah.
So no names. You can't spoil a name yet.
Well, the name of the big villain in Action 1000 is named Rogol Zar, and this is an alien that's coming to Earth with an agenda. The first part of the name is named after my doctor who saved my life. I had a big thing last December. I had a MRSA infection. And every day I would hear this German woman would come in and work on my face, but I couldn't see her. I was blind. And I hear this name, Rogol, every day. Yeah. And then I go, she's definitely going to be the villain. And I couldn't wait to tell her as soon as and then I told her that, when I was finally awake, and I go, I think I'm going to use your name as the villain in the new Superman books. And she went, uh-huh. And then I realized I never told her what I did for a living. She just sounded like an insane person. And then she Googled me, and then the next day came in very excited that she may actually be in the Superman book.
And can I just say how cool it is you work in a Google plug?
I did.
Yeah, you did.
See what I did there? Do I get free Google now?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so do you guys prefer to think about Superman as the last survivor of Krypton, or as part of an extended family of survivors that includes Zod, Supergirl, his dog, Crypto, etc.?
Somewhere in between.
Okay.
I think that one of the nicest titles that can be ascribed to Superman is Last Son of Krypton. I just love that because it is so heavy with implication.
Yeah, the responsibility.
Right, exactly. It describes him and his background so well, just Last Son of Krypton. And so I really like that. And it's like, okay, Supergirl, fine. But there comes a point where it gets kind of too much, because then that invalidates the last son of Krypton idea. So I say it's kind of like in the middle somewhere, a little more towards just a handful.
What would you label the horse? Streaky. Streaky the super horse?
As the idea that probably shouldn't be in the book.
Comet the super horse, yeah.
Comet the super-
Streaky's the cat.
Yeah.
I apologize. Again, I'm new.
Yeah.
Okay.
Beppo's the monkey.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
We know
They're
this
Googling
stuff.
it right now. Yeah, that's all real stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Everything we just said is real stuff.
There's a couple of people here that are like, true nerds are like, you got it. Okay, so Paul, in Superman Peace on Earth, Superman confronts the limits of his powers, not in the form of an all-powerful supervillain, but against a very real problem, world hunger. Why did you choose to test Superman this way?
Well, when Alex Ross and I came up with a story for that, we wanted to tell a story that was very close to Superman's heart and also to his origins. We didn't really want to do the ultimate punch-up with Lex or Brainiac or anything like that. We wanted to go back to Superman at his most human level, and also do a story that speaks to his origin as a farmer, because he goes back to that at the end, at least as a touchstone at the end of that story. But it was also kind of, we put ourselves in the position of, what if we were Superman? What if, I think everybody has fantasized, I want to put on the cape and I want to solve all of humanity's problems. And once we looked at it from that point of view, it was like, then we're dealing in a real world with real people, with other countries that have other agendas, and the ideals of Superman don't always work in the real world. I mean, it gets to be too human, too selfish. And what does he do in a situation like that? If he goes out to eliminate that, then he becomes a god, a monster, or a dictator. And he's got to take a step back, and even though what he's trying to do is set a good example and be altruistic, all he can do is suggest, and all he can do is lead in small ways. He can't solve the big problems. He can, when a dam is busting or when aliens invade, that's great. But on a real human level, when it comes to give and receive, he's just as human as all of us. And that was something that was really important for us to touch on that.
That's great. Marv, you have, I heard you got lucky as a young man while touring the DC office and received an unpublished Superman story. Can you talk about that, and is it true that it's about to be published for the first time in Action Comics 80 Years of Superman?
Yeah, the DC Comics used to have a tour every week of the DC offices. And I went to high school about 4 or 5 blocks away, High School of Art and Design, because my intent was to become an artist. So I would run over there and go on the tours when I was able to. One of the times that I was going there, Saul Harrison, who was the production chief at the time, later became publisher, was wheeling out a post office post office cart, one of these things that's about 6, 7 feet wide, 6, 7 feet long, 4 feet wide, 4 feet high, filled with artwork from the 1940s, all of which was being written off. It was never published. And they were finally trying to clear space, and he was taking it to the incinerators. Now, you got to remember, it's horrifying, even the concept of that and some of the other stuff that was done. But back then, not even the artists wanted their art back. To most of those people, most of the artists, because I've spoken to them, they wanted to clear their offices. It was giant stacks of paper that had no value as far as they were concerned. It took the fans, it took those of us here, and the fans from my generation to say, this work had value, this work was special. Anyway, he's wheeling this stuff out, and there's 3 or 4 people on the tour. And he says, if you kids want anything, grab it before I take it to the incinerator. Like Uncle Scrooge, we dove into the money vault, swam through the pages, grabbed everything we could, did not take the rest of the tour because we were weighed down with artwork. And this is the 1940s artwork, so it's a lot larger than the artwork that most of you may be familiar with that you see at conventions. We rushed downstairs and started trading, and I noticed that I had 8 or 9 pages of a 12-page story that was all written off a Superman story. And I started trading multiple pages to get the last 3. So I walked out of there. I took a cab at like 13 years old. I had to get a cab because it was so heavy, with a complete Superman story as well as a whole bunch of other stuff, and it never saw print. It never had. When they were putting together the Action Comics 80 Years of Superman Deluxe Edition, Paul Levitz, who used to be publisher, he's now working with them in other ways, asked if he could print it. And I said, absolutely. This is the perfect place. It's the only place that I would have said yes to. And you'll be able to see it. They left it in black and white because it was never published. It was never colored. And they didn't want to color it now.
Why wasn't it published? Do you know why?
They had thousands of pages of unpublished stuff. Now, the artwork was done in 1946, written by Jerry Siegel, drawn by the Joe Shuster Studios. That we know because Paul Levitz was able to find the bills. DC has everything. But they found that. Why it wasn't published back then, I don't know, but it never was.
Was it like filthy or something?
No.
It's completely inappropriate.
It was as weird as all the stories from 1940s were. But 2 years later, in 1947 or 48, we found a new version of that story drawn by Wayne Boring, now a 10-page story. So for some reason, they decided not to publish it, but then you reuse the script, only cleaning it up or fixing it up a little bit better. So for the first time ever, the story is going to see print, and it couldn't be in a better book than that one. So I'm really pleased about it.
Right.
That's great. I'm jealous. So we're unfortunately almost running out of time, and we want to get some audience questions going. So as a last quick general question, what are your favorite Superman stories? It can be one you wrote.
I am really bad at issue numbers and everything else, but there's a story that we had earlier mentioned, Wayne Boring, where Superman goes back to Krypton. And I must have been a late 50s story. Help me out here, Marv.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, Superman's return to Krypton.
Go to the old guy.
Yeah.
He'd remember.
Yeah. It was called Superman's Return to Krypton. And I remember reading it as a kid, and it just struck me because it was a very sad story. Superman gets to go back to Krypton. He sees what a beautiful place it was. And it was something. And it was also this story about discovery. It was stuff that he didn't know about where he came from. And I think ultimately we're all curious about where we came from and stories we never would have heard as a kid, like, your crazy old aunt never told you until you were 35 or whatever. So there was something about that I still find very poignant to this day. And a story that was really, I think, kind of ahead of its time for when it appeared.
For me, I'd also go back to about that time period, because I would not talk about anything I did. Someone else could, I hope.
Pressure.
The original Death of Superman, which was an amazing story written by Jerry Siegel, the creator of Superman, in the 60s, late 50s, early 60s, something where Superman dies, and the story was amazingly effective. Because he actually dies in it, It's a great, great story, and I remember it as a kid. And even now, if I read it, it still is emotional. There were a lot of stories back then, more modern times. All-Star Superman by Grant Morrison, I thought was a really good Superman story, again from left field. Those are the type of stories I like. And also Superman for All Seasons by Jeff Loeb. I thought that was a really solid story that took you in a different place for Superman. There's been so many Superman stories done over 80 years. It's nice when someone finds a new tack to writing him.
I'll go with Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow by Alan.
Oh yeah.
All right, you get that one. I'll take the first Mxyzptlk story. I mean, I love the little jerk, and looking at that very first one where he's this little weird Elmer Fudd flying man, I just thought this is the fun side of Superman, and I love that story. Not every story with him, but I always like the idea that in some way he is to Superman what Superman is to us. Superman's an advanced creature, then one step beyond, a few dimensions beyond, is this strange godlike creature that can either be fun or amusing or else be absolutely terrifying. And then I'm sort of intrigued, what's beyond him? What's in dimensions, what scares him? And I always like that relationship.
Mine was Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, which was Alan Moore's last testament of Superman before Crisis and you tearing everything up.
I killed them all.
That one was. I think the first time there was genuine emotion, like you felt like there's loss happening, and Superman 400 is this anniversary issue, and it's one of these great moments in comics where they literally found who would be the most insane, coolest people to write and draw Superman that you could ever imagine. People not even from the world of traditional superheroes. They have Steve Ditko doing Superman and Mobius and Brian Boland, and it's just this celebration of stories and artwork, and it rattled me. And when I was offered Action 1000, which is in the same vein of that, I was like, oh yeah, I have to be part of that. But if you ever get a chance, it's a Superman 400. It also comes with a Superman portfolio, so you get a large version of all these beautiful images of Superman, and it's just everything you'd ever want out of a Superman experience right there. And the first Superman movie, Richard Donner, just showed my 5-year-old son the movie, thinking he wouldn't make about 10 minutes into it. I thought he'd bail. Riveted. Couldn't take his eyes off of the movie. So it's a great experience.
Great. So who wants to go first? Oh, I'm going to throw this to you awkwardly.
Okay.
So here goes.
What is that?
That is awkward.
That is the way we
Okay.
ask Google questions awkwardly. So, because we like to embarrass people.
Right.
We like to really embarrass people who can't throw specifically.
Yes.
So my question for you guys is, how do you deal with, considering how long the Superman comic has been around, how do you deal with keeping it consistent and not conflicting inside of itself? Do you have to consider that when you're writing, or is there somebody who reads it later and says, you totally can't say that because it really conflicts with this other thing that was said 30 years ago, or does it just kind of work out?
Well, I was lucky because when I first started, Superman had a new starting point where they just said, okay, we're starting clean. And that was John Byrne and Marv and Jerry Ordway, who kind of relaunched the franchise. So I was fortunate enough to be able to come on and say, we had a fairly clean slate. And I think that's important to do. It's only fair, because to strictly adhere to 80 years of publishing history is really, really hard to do and totally impractical, I might add, I think. So
I think if you worry about making sure every story fits into some place in continuity, you're not able to expand outward. You're always, the box that you're in keeps getting smaller and smaller. I think you have to take the spirit of the character, the idea of the character, and the approach of what you're trying to do to tell more stories, and not worry about every little detail of the past. It's fiction. No one's going to come and say, that's not what happened. I was there.
Well,
Are
that's
you
what
sure?
Twitter
Yeah.
I'm pretty
That's
sure
the
some
internet.
people
No.
at Comic-Con probably would.
Yeah, what I do is I ignore everyone else's work and just barrel ahead straight, and it works out great for me.
That's already on Twitter.
Yeah. Honestly,
Brian says.
you know what the
wants
key
to
is?
take this
You live how you're living. You live in the moment. You live in the now. You yourself. You live in the moment.
You
You're
have
not
to.
sitting there living your continuity that brought you to this. I'm not sitting here with a big thought balloon over my head thinking about what happened to me in 8th grade that led me here. It's in the moment, and when things happen that relate to your past, then you bring them up when they're appropriate. But it's a trap that comic book writers can get sucked into, where you think you have to acknowledge everything that ever happened to this character at every moment, or if like I said, if I tell my wife I loved her today, wait a second, 35 years ago you told a girl in high school you loved her. That's how comic book fans sometimes act at you. Wait a minute.
Yep.
Well, yeah, that was true then, and it's true here. So.
Is that how you reply to Twitter followers?
No, I ignore it. No, it's part of the game. I actually like the part of the game where they go, hey, wait a minute, I'm the resident expert of Superman, and I'm about to tell you what you've done wrong. I like being there for them. No, I do. Like I was writing X-Men, and someone who's read every X-Men wants to come give me the business. What a great time they're having.
Yeah.
They read all their comics, and now they're giving me the business. Anyway.
My question was, one of my favorite iterations of Superman is when he shows up in a Justice League America episode where it's Bizarro World, and essentially all of the Justice League characters are evil versions of themselves, or at least morally kind of defunct versions of themselves. And in that episode, Superman lobotomizes Darkseid. And I guess my question is, that was one of my favorite iterations of Superman because it showed how hope fails, like hope does diminish after a period of time. And that was kind of what that Bizarro Justice League was the amalgamation of, was their world had gone to such a dark point that they just said, screw it, we're just going to start lobotomizing the enemy, right? Mm-hmm.
Well, it depends what you're hoping for. Like, if you're hoping for a lobotomy, it was a very hopeful story.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess my question is like, that really resonated with me because, as real human beings dealing with the day-to-day, we do lose hope, even in the small things, and sometimes very easily in the big things. And so that really resonated with me, that like somebody as, like you guys saying, a symbol of hope, like Superman, that in that iteration of his story, he just quickly, and like, I think it's the Batman from the regular world sees that happen, and he's like, holy shit.
Yeah.
He's lobotomizing people. We really have something to worry about here. Like, this is a serious threat. Do you guys ever see Superman going back in a direction like that, where his hope is so on the hairline, where he's dealing with something that the world itself, or like the city, or even other superheroes look to him and worry, because if he loses hope, not only is it a symbol of hope crashing, but he might really be something to worry about himself.
Well, I
that
think
was really kind of cool to me.
I think stories like that are important because it gives the heroes from the real world, our world, a mirror to what could happen if they do cross that line. And it's like It's a Wonderful Life, where you see what his life could be like if he did in fact lose hope. I think with Superman, the challenge is there to make sure that he never loses that, because that's what makes him different from everybody else. That's the ultimate test. It's to keep that hope alive for everybody else and for himself.
That's part one of a two-part story.
I mean, I've seen
Yeah.
I've seen both episodes, but still was really interesting.
Good answer, by the way.
So I really love Superman. He was my first favorite superhero as a kid, so this is really cool talk for me. So my question is, one of the things that I think makes Superman, more challenging in some ways is that he doesn't have some of that internal conflict that you see in, a Batman or a Spider-Man or something, where he's, really, really struggling with his own insecurities in a lot of places. And I think there have been a lot of really interesting takes, on that over the years, from, the Paul, when you brought up earlier, Superman confronting a real world situation where his powers don't apply or things like that. And so I was curious, without that level of kind of internal conflict, what is kind of your favorite way that you or somebody else has approached that kind of thing of finding a conflict, finding a challenge for Superman that's not related to that internal struggle?
For me, I think what you do with Superman is his internal conflict is about what is the best way of solving this problem? How do I do it with the least collateral damage? How do I create a situation that makes this work? Rather than, oh, Lois didn't want to date me tonight. That's a very different type of thing. He's approaching his problems, deal with how to do his job and how to do it the best way possible, because he is only a person. He may have a lot of powers, but he's only a person, and he's going to have questions on, is he doing the right thing? How do I do it? How do I make it work? And he's going to keep trying to find the best way that nobody gets hurt in the process.
Yeah, I found myself looking for my relatability with Superman, and the one internal struggle I found for myself is, I'm a father. I have 4 kids. I have little kids, I have big kids. And one of the hardest things for me for parenting is, you have to be on your game all day. You can't. Today I'm going to just be the worst version of myself. No, you have to be the best version of yourself like every day, or at least try, right? So you're like every day, and it could be exhausting.
I have a 9-month-old, so I'm starting to figure that out.
Oh yeah, well when they can walk and talk and they're actually watching you,
Yeah.
like looking for hypocrisy. Like there's an age of like 7 or 8 where they walk around the house going, well, I didn't get any candy. I'm going to watch to see if you get any candy. And so there's like just general. And I see Superman has to do that. He has to be Superman every day. You can't just today I'm going to walk around in my robe and no, I have to like live up to this every day. And that's the connection I feel like as adults we have to live up to a certain responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And if we blow it once, we blew it. It's it.
I've always had this this thing for a different Superman story where like if there had never been a Superman, how would you do it kind of thing? And it was, we pick up on Superman when he's like 42 years old. And even at then, he's barely a myth because he was someone throughout that first 25 years of him being Superman, never revealed himself to the public. He only ever would have come out like once every 3 years when the world demanded it somehow. And then ultimately the conflict would have been exactly when do you choose to get involved? Because that to me is something we all face every day. How often have we walked down the street and seen something happening across the street where we wondered, should we get involved or not? That woman, she's really kind of being hard on her child. Should I go say something? That's the conflict for Superman, which is when do you get involved and exactly how far do you go? And, you know, you mentioned this earlier, which is Superman doesn't tell people what to do. He sort of hopes to inspire. And so you start to build around that. And there are so many stories that you can pull out of that. So, yeah.
Cool. I was gonna have a question, but before that, I want to say thank you all. Like, you all have amazing contributions, and nobody says thank you enough to you. So, like, thank every one of you, like, so much. My question kind of pulls from, like, Dan's recent storyline in action around the Oz effect. Do you think we deserve Superman?
I sort of wrestle with that all the time because I think that one of the things about politics right now, without getting into either party, is more and more I ask myself, why would any good person do this? Because we punish them. And I think we see that across, whoever signs up to run for office is basically knows they're going to get nuked by the other side, right? And so I ask myself that all the time. When do we find out that we do or do not deserve someone who is trying to act on behalf of us? And I think it's a fascinating theme to play with.
Well, I'd say yes.
Yeah, I would hope so.
Yeah. We do deserve it. We don't deserve the opposition research, but yeah, we do. We do deserve.
Yeah, but the question is, who would step up?
Absolutely. Who would step up? Like finding out what you found out this week.
Yeah.
Like with the analyticals, I'm sure you guys are dealing with that. Like who would want to put yourself under that micro? Like that's even more intense. Like the first thing was intense. This is even more intense. So yeah, I don't know. But I remove that from the equation. It's just someone shows up and goes, screw it. There's the right thing to do. I'm going to do it. Yeah,
right.
we do deserve that.
Yes.
Yeah. Paul doesn't think so.
I agree.
Paul thinks we deserve to burn. He likes to write the Joker.
A little bit, yeah.
Thanks.
Anyone else? One more. We've got time for one more.
I wanted to say I love hearing how much you guys have thought about the story and about character and just how deeply you're kind of invested in that. I just really loved watching that. A little bit related to that, one of my personal favorite Superman stories is Superman Red Sun, which for anybody who doesn't know about that is Superman, instead of his rocket ship crashing in Kansas, it crashes in the Soviet Union, and he grows up there instead, and kind of like how that transforms the character. I just wanted to know if you guys have any like thoughts about that, about how that would change Superman and what, kind of what would stay constant about the character, because what's of intrinsic to him and what he picked up from the Kents by being raised by them.
Well, I think that's why the Elseworlds in general is such a big thing at DC, because all the characters can be shown through these awesome like cracked mirrors and
Right.
yeah, right. You've all done them.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I did one in the animated series where he leads an invasion on Earth because he believes that he was raised on Apocalypse, and it was almost like the Manchurian Candidate. He had all these. He was attacked in space. His memory was basically blotted out, and these other memories were put in that he was the son of Darkseid. He was found and brought to Apocalypse, and he has a whole history with Darkseid, which only goes back like about a week. And he leads an invasion on Earth, and that is a very natural thing for him to do. And when he returns, he is himself again, but he's really mad, and he goes after Darkseid. And Bruce Timm and I said, this is the only time Darkseid will ever get physical in the show. This is the only time that Superman is so mad that he confronts him. And he goes and he fights him, and Darkseid is forced to fight physically. And Superman beats him, and he loses. And he loses. We wanted it to be a spiritual a defeat for him, because he takes Darkseid, throws him into the street, and says to the people of Apocalypse, you're free. And they look at Superman, they look at Darkseid, and they pick him up and they put him back on the throne, because that's what they know. And Superman had to lose it, and he had to confront him, and he actually starts to go after him again. And Supergirl, who's a part of the story, says, stop. If you go after him, someone's going to die, and it won't be Darkseid. And he realizes, I can't do this. I cannot be the liberator. I cannot be the guy who takes down tyrants, because that's what I'm going to become. And it's a very hollow victory for him, and he has to live with that. And he has to go back, and we imagined that was going to be the last episode of the series, where if we did more, he would have to rebuild that trust on Earth, and the only person who really believes in him is Lois. And we thought that's a great place, because he sort of lost the trust of Earth, but he's gained the love of Lois. And we thought, if we don't do any more, this is a good place to leave it.
Yeah, but I will say you just brought up some elements we didn't get to talk about today. We're talking about how obsessed we are with the characters. It's Lois and Jimmy and Perry.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
Like it's the cast that we haven't even talked about. It's absolutely the best cast.
It is. It
It's
really
tremendous cast.
is.
Yeah. Sorry.
So we're going to have, actually, our guest speakers are awesome and are going to sign some great posters, beautiful posters, for us if you guys want to start lining up back there. But before you do that, I want to make a couple of announcements from DC Comics. Action Comics 1000 is coming out on April 18th, and that is 80 pages for $7.99. And then Action Comics 80 Years of Superman is 365 pages, and that's a hardcover for $29.99. So please visit DC Comics, pick those up. I'm pretty excited about it. And thank you so much for being here. Thank you, DC, and thank you guys.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.